Rotation. Generally something I don't think we get to do enough of, something that we're pretty heavily designed around doing. Okay, we've got 2 arms and 2 legs working around a singular head, central spinal column. So everything we do has small amounts of rotation in it. Generally, particularly with exercise, we get stuck in a pretty sagittal, pretty straight line kind of movement. So I'm a big fan of doing twisting stuff. I'm going to show you guys some really simple things that you can be doing, and little variations in amongst that you can just do on a daily basis. It shouldn't take long, but very effective for helping keep your hips and your spine and your shoulders really healthy, and then connecting the dots for your feet all the way right up to your hands. Cool. So you just need a comfortable area that you can lie on. I'd recommend having a bit of floor space if you can. If you don't have that luxury, then you're welcome to do everything on one side and then flip around or whatever you need to do to be able to get the other side done as well. We're going to start with some really basic hip roll movements. Okay, so I'll get you lying on your back. Okay, in a comfortable position. Okay, so depending on how comfortable your shoulders are, you can have your arms out nice and wide. If that's no good, you can have them a bit closer beside you, or you can have your elbows benched and your hands resting on your rib cage. Okay, whatever's going to give you a bit of leverage to be able to support your back. Feet touching together, legs glued together. Okay, I don't want any daylight between your legs whatsoever. Okay, if you happen to have a bit more of a thigh gap, really press your heels together, and that'll help to connect all these deep inner thigh muscles. It should be really helpful for organizing your hips as you go through your hip rolls. Okay, tipping both feet across, you want to lift the outside foot so that as you're going across, your knees should stay pretty much stacked. What I see a lot of is the knees splitting or sliding back. Okay, try your best to really slide that top knee forward so that you've got one knee stacked right on top of the other. You'll get a much clearer stretch through your waistline or your hips, and then pressing a little bit off the arms to help keep your sternum facing up towards the ceiling. Okay, so your head and your upper chest face directly towards the ceiling. Your lower ribs and your waistline is what starts to rotate. Okay, and then we're just going to slowly roll all the way up and over to the other side. Okay, just do exactly the same thing. Reach with the top knee. Try and find lots of length through your waistline. Press off your arms to help keep your chest facing towards the ceiling. In an ideal world, you take a really deep breath in as you reach the legs away, and then you can either hold the position as you breathe in and out a handful of times, or you could use your breath out to push and roll your body back, one bit of your back at a time. Okay, we'll just keep going from side to side a handful of times. Okay, so letting both legs roll over to one side. Now, if you're feeling a bit tight in your neck, it's quite nice to also let your head twist the other way, trying to distance your face from your knees. Good, and for the sake of time, I'm only going to do a couple each way, but I'd really recommend you do a handful more each way once you get comfortable with the movements. Now, how we can start to make this a little bit deeper or play around with our hip dynamics, really simply, we're just going to cross one knee over top of the other one, okay? And that's going to take one half of the pelvis and tilt it under, while the other half of the pelvis is tilted forward a little bit. So if you do have any sacral issues, just be careful with this one. Generally, it's pretty good, but you may find one side feels a whole lot nicer to do and the other side may be a bit more blocked, okay? Just work away at that in your own pace. If you need any hands, you can always touch base with us and we'll talk you through how to work with that. Okay, so as we're going across, again, your elbows are working to keep your chest still facing towards the ceiling. Then press off your arms to slowly roll back and across to the other side. Now, I've still got my legs twisted the same way as I go across. So this time the stretch will feel quite different. It'll be a bit more around the front half of your body as it's pulling through those deep hip flexors and down to the front of your thigh. Again, you might do a couple of those each way, and then you just simply swap your legs over the other way. And it's the same deal. Again, let your legs be pulled across your body, get a bit more of a stretch through one side of the hips. Good. And again, same as you go the other way, it'll just box your hips in a little bit more, so you get a bit more around the glutes or up into your lower back, depending on what's tight for you. Nice. And then the last version is to have your feet and legs out quite wide. Okay, I'm quite tall, I'm about 6 foot, so I generally have my feet about half a meter apart. Depending on how tall you are, obviously you can modify that. Another good guide is just towards the outsides of the mat, really simply. Okay, and again, the arms out nice and wide, let both legs roll across. Okay, the ideal measurement would see that your inside of your knee would reach the inside of your foot on the other leg. So you'd almost be getting a knee to foot connection. That's what we're aiming for one day. Might not happen, but it's good to have goals. Cool, and again, roll the legs across to the other side. And again, you might do a good half dozen or so of these each way. I'm really not that attached to the numbers, so I'd recommend you try lots of different versions of it. So legs parallel, knees crossed, feet nice and wide, really simply. If you really want to get stuck into it, have a play around with other foot positions. So instead of crossing at the knees, you might cross at the ankle, for example. You might try arms up or arms down. I'm really happy for you to explore and see what feels quite good for you. There's no set rules. As long as it doesn't cause you any pain and you can still breathe, go for it. You know, you might find some really nice stretches for you. The other part to this is getting the upper body moving. So we've kept the upper body still as a bit of an anchor while the lower body moves. This time we're going to just reverse those roles a little bit. We're going to do some book openers and some chalk circles, okay? So if you're at home, I'd recommend grabbing a pillow or a cushion or something that you can use to support your head, okay? For the time today, I'm just going to have my arm out to rest my head on my arm. You want a big bend in your hips, so you bring your knees up. So you've got a good 90-degree bend in your hips. 90-degree bend in your knees as well, but the feet aren't quite as essential in this one. It's more about using your legs to hold your hips in place. Okay. Start with one arm out in front of you, slide it forward a little bit, so you end up almost rolling onto your stomach, and then you're going to lift the arms straight up. Now what often happens once the arm's up is people just kind of sink into the shoulders, or they're encouraged to drop the shoulder blade back. I'd much rather see you stay really wide, like you're reaching up for the ceiling. Turn your head to look at your hand, and then you're going to continue to slowly roll back. Okay. Now if you don't have a wall here, ideally you just keep rolling back until you feel a nice stretch somewhere around the front of your shoulders, maybe the middle of your back, maybe even your lower back, depending on where the tight spot is for you. Okay, take a couple breaths into whatever the tight spot is, then bring the arm back up and over. And you can either just keep going from that point, or if it feels nice to, really try and stretch the shoulder forward each time before you start rolling up and over the back. Good. So that's our book opener, and again I like about 10 to a dozen of those movements. Really simple, very effective. There's lots of different ways that you can do it. That's a really good starting point. Have a little play, see what feels good for you. My other favorite exercise for sorting out the shoulders is called a chalk circle. Okay, so if you can imagine the tip of your finger acts like a piece of chalk. Okay, you're going to keep the tip of your finger on the ground the whole time. You're going to try and draw a circle for the most part around your body. Okay, so you're going to reach up towards your ear. Now once you get the arm in line with your ear, you've really got to shrug the shoulder up to your ear to give it lots of space to move. From there we then rotate our spine, okay, keeping the shoulder up until you can get the arm all the way around behind you. Okay, now whenever you find a tight spot along the way, try and pause where it is. Take a couple of really deep breaths. Try and use the expansion of the rib cage to stretch you out, and then breathing out, you just relax into it. Okay, and then when you're ready, you can circle the arm back up and over the other way. Good. And we just repeat that process. In an ideal world, the fingertip stays on the ground the whole time, but if there's any discomfort, any sharp clicks or pops or any weird sensations you're not used to, just go to just before that point, breathe into whatever you need to, make sure you've got the shoulder elevated. Make sure you're rotating the spine. People often get into trouble here where they just take the arm back without actually turning their chest, okay? So as long as you get your arm in line with your ear, the rest of it comes at the spine to give you the space to rotate back before your arm continues along the way. And again, I'd like about a dozen of those. Good to do them both on the same side and then flip over to do the other way. but ultimately see what feels good for you. If you only need 2 or 3, or if you find that you want to do a blend of the two, it's really nice to try and break it up a little bit sometimes as well. And depending on how fancy you want to be, you can even put the two together a little bit. For example, we could do hip roll to one side, get a nice stretch, and then do a chalk circle around and reverse that movement, get a nice stretch, and then legs across to the other side. For example, okay, there's lots of nice ways that you can put the two together to get some awesome stretches and some big twisting out of your body. Couldn't recommend it enough. Make sure you do it regularly. Ideally, just 5 or 10 minutes every day can do really great things for loosening up your back. But just see what you can filter into your everyday life. Have any questions?